Hi there, I'm Joe Meling for Weaver Leathercraft, and I'd like to welcome you to this introduction on floral carving. One of the most important things in any job is not only having the right tools, but knowing how to use them. So today we're going to head over to the bench and go over our basic tooling set, including your swivel knife, as well as a few additional tools that I recommend adding to your starter kit and really get you going off on the right foot. So let's head over there and take a peek. Okay, let's start with the swivel knife that's going to come in our basic tooling set. This knife has a 3/8 blade, which is really nice width to it. Same thing with the barrel, and it's got a pretty comfortable cradle for your finger. Now, as I start running this knife, it's important to remember that the intention of this video is to be an overview and a brief introduction to the tools that are included in your basic tooling set, including your swivel knife, as well as a few additional tools that I recommend adding on just to really get you started out in the right direction. Now we're going to go over a few tips and tricks as we talk about each tool, and let's start right here. Now you notice as I'm running this knife that I'm turning my leather and always pulling that knife towards me. That's important to see where you're going. If I'm pushing that knife away, I'm not going to have as much control, and I'm also not going to be able to see as well where I'm going because my hand's going to be covering that. It's also important to try to get as smooth the lines as we can, especially coming around those corners, and fade those lines out as you draw them. Your swivel knife's going to be very important because this is the foundation of your whole pattern. Now that we have that cut in, let's start talking about bevels. Now first off, we'll go with the bevel that comes in the basic tooling set. I'm going to bevel a couple lines with this to show you the results that we can get and expect to get out of this bevel. Now this has a pretty flat face on it with a lot deeper checkering. So you'll notice there's a pretty extensive shadow that comes out from that bevel. We're going to compare that to my first add-on tool. Okay, the first tool I want to talk to you about adding on, and I think it's a great addition, is going to be a steep bevel. Now that comes in two sizes. This one here happens to be the smaller size, but let's take a look and see the impression that this tool makes. You'll notice that it's a lot steeper and the checkering is a lot smoother on that. So it's gonna get a really nice little crisp line that's easy to fade out. It's a lot easier to keep smooth. You don't have to go over it too much to start getting a lot smoother bevels. And getting those smooth lines is going to be one of the biggest challenges when you're first getting started, is getting a nice smooth line with that bevel. But that's okay, practice, right? But you can see there, it's a lot crisper, a lot more defined, as opposed to that other bevel with a flatter face. So I really recommend this as one of the additional tools to get with your starter kit. So I'm going to go ahead and bevel out the rest of this pattern using this steep bevel. And it's important to remember that you're building on the foundation that you set with your swivel knife. So the smoother cuts that you can make with your swivel knife, the easier it's going to be to run a nice smooth bevel line. Now that being said, please don't get too frustrated. The beveling can be one of the most frustrating parts of learning to carve leather, I think. And until you get the hang of it, it's just flat hard. There's no getting around it. But with practice, you'll get there. Now, a couple things to notice is, one, that I'm going over this a couple times. Okay, I'll go right to left, and then I'll ease that bevel right back around left to right. And what I'm doing is smoothing out any little rough spots that I have. Now, a couple little tricks to get you down started on the right path to getting smooth bevel lines is going to be not walking your bevel too far. So what I mean by that is when you hit down with your mallet and then you go to move your bevel over to the side to hit it again, don't move a full width of your bevel. So tap that once and then just barely move that over. So not even a quarter of your bevel width, almost just like an eighth of it. But tap that bevel, let your fingers almost springboard and pick it up just a little bit as it moves over to the side, and tap it again. And it's a rhythm that you'll learn to get in time with, but remember that the downward pressure is going to come from your mallet hitting down. Left to right is what your fingers do. Some people can run into the problem of trying to push down with their hand that's holding the tool so hard that it makes it hard to run it. Let's look at the next tool that comes in your basic set. And that's going to be your Pear Shader. Your Pear Shader is going to be used to help bring some shadow in and start providing a little definition in your tooling. So I'm going to use him right out here on the end of these leaves here. And I almost kind of fade that out just a little bit just to soften that so it's not a real harsh line. Now if we lay that one out here by itself and hit it once, you can see the impression that that one makes. It's just a pretty sharp impression, so I try to soften those edges as I'm running it in my floral work. Now, this works great in some of these bigger spots. We're going to run that here, get a little bit of shadowing in these places, but I'm also going to show you my next tool that I recommend adding on, and that's going to be a small Pear Shader. Now this small one, you'll notice, has a little bit more checkering to it. It's a little deeper checkers in it, and it's a smaller imprint. If we lay that one next to this one that comes in the kit, you can see it's a little bit shorter, a little sharper point out at the end, but you can really see where that checkering comes into play at. Now the size of it is going to make it to where we can fit in smaller areas a lot better. Just to show you a comparison, we'll go the other side of this leaf here. So you can see a difference in that checkering. You can really pick that up on the two sides there. It fits nice out here on the ends. Use the fat side here. We'll get into a little more of the how-tos on these different tools in future videos. But I just want to give you an overlook on some of the different tools that we have access to. Again, soften that edge up so it's not super sharp. Notice as I continue to run this small Pear Shader, the ridges that are getting created in between each point on that pedal. And that's where we're going to start adding a whole nother dimension to our flat piece of leather here. Also, the checkering in this tool is really going to hold your antique at the end. The next tool we're going to take a look at comes in your basic set. This is called a Cedar. Now this just set on its own. It's just a very small little seed with a little bit of a starburst around it, which is going to be enough texture to, again, hold on to that antique and really show off that seed. I like using these right in here at the base of the flower stems there. It really starts to set apart that flower stem from the rest of your vine work. Again, it's a small little tool, but pretty handy little tool that comes in your kit. You can also clump these together and create a little seed cluster if you needed to do for a flower center, but we're going to talk about that in just a second. Now, right behind this seed is a great place for my next tool addition. This little tool addition is a mule's foot. This is the small option. You can get a large or a small, but I really like this small. It's a nice, sharp little tool. Gives a real nice little imprint there. And the reason I like having a single mule's foot as opposed to a continuous one is because I like to be able to bend that and fade it as I want around a stem and around a curve there, rather than being a straight line of continuous mule's feet. That's why I really recommend the single as opposed to the continuous. The next tool I recommend adding on is called a leaf liner. Now, this leaf liner is a pretty unique tool. It can run in two different directions. We'll see with the angles going both ways, you can run up both sides of this stem. I'm going to put that little short piece right next to my stem and angle that tool a little bit. I don't want it sitting flat, because if we sit that flat, you can see it's pretty sharp lines, and you see that tool mark on both sides there. So I'm going to tip that a little bit to soften the edge so it just fades that out. We'll talk more as we do future videos, but we don't want to have tool marks. We just want everything to flow and not be able to see that that is where you put that tool down. So that's where tipping that can really benefit you. Soften that line and fade it around there. Let's move on to the next tool that's included in your basic set, and this tool here is going to be called a Vayner. Now, your Vayner, if we set it down flat, gives a nice little kind of a crescent moon shape to that. But again, just like our leaf liner, this is another tool that we want to tip and utilize just the corner of that and allow it to fade out and not get the full imprint of that tool. So I'm going to use that Vayner right in here on this leaf, right over top of where I just ran that leaf liner. See that really starting to bring that leaf to life. There's two other places on this particular pattern here that I'd like to use that. One is going to be right around this little swirl, if you will, coming off of here. I'm going to angle that and just fade into it. I can rotate as we come around here. By tipping that tool a little bit more, I can see a little bit more of it as we go. And then fade it back off again. So you can really make that rolled look in some of your vines. I'll also come right here, kind of the pod of this flower. I'm going to really just tip it and barely get the edge on there. But what that's going to do now is help really set apart that flower stem the way we already did with the seed and the mule's foot. Just this Vayner on that edge is something I like to do that really touches that off good. This next tool we'll take a look at is out of our basic set, and this is a backgrounding tool. Now, this is a matte backgrounder, meaning that it's going to cover a surface all the way. We don't have to run it in a certain pattern like some other background tools, but you can see if we lay that down, it's just kind of a little bit of an oval shape there. It's a little teardropped almost, a little wider on one end than it is the other to help fit down in some background spaces there as well. So we're going to go ahead and run that one real quick. And again, watching for even pressure on there, not getting that tool tipped too much and creating lines in that background. We want an even mat across that background when using this tool. Once you start putting in that background, it really starts adding depth to your pattern. The last tool we're going to take a look at out of our basic set is called a Camouflage Tool. Some people like to use them up here in their flower petals. I don't use them there typically a whole lot, but we'll go ahead and do it on one so you can see where it goes here. You can kind of run down that flower petal like that, and it just starts bringing a little texture in there. Again, not something you're going to see in my work a whole lot. I typically use this tool more as a border stamp tool. So if we were to grab our knife and cut one more line here, this tool could actually lay right in here by this border. There, starts creating a nice little border. Now, my last additional tool that I want to add on to you is going to be a flower center. There's a few different flower center options. This one just is particularly my favorite, so I'm going to add it to my list here. I'm going to lay that right here in the center and hit it down square for you. Now just like that, it looks pretty good, right? But here's one that we can make a little bit better even. So I'm going to go back to one of my other tools that I added on to you, our leaf liner. Okay, now we're going to get a little bit more use out of this tool, and I'm going to really tip that in here, just using the toe of it, running those lines, making sure they're running out towards my petals. We're going to be careful not to cover our seeds in that flower center, but I want to just get a little more definition around that center and start creating a little bit more shadow in here. Now the next tool I'm going to come back with is that steep bevel again. I'm going to come back with our steep bevel, because this just keeps looking better, right? But we can keep going. Steep bevel I'm going to run right down next to that flower center there. Again, without touching my seeds. I don't want to actually cover those up. But you can really start piecing some of these tools together and creating a great look in that flower. And that just adds more depth, like that center sits down in there. And we can take that center, line it back up, make sure our seeds are lined up. Give it just one little hit, crisp that up a little bit. Very cool little center. So I do recommend adding that on to your set. We're going to come back to our swivel knife, put it to work, get some decorative cuts put in here, and just finish off this little pattern that we have going. Decorative cuts are going to be that last little touch you do to your pattern. Help bring some life into your flowers, leaves, and all of your stem work, creating flow and really bringing it to life. We can do a whole video in the future on your swivel knife and how to run that the best way, and little tricks and tips on putting in decorative cuts. But I hope you found this video helpful in just a brief overview and getting to know some of the tools that are in your starter kit, as well as a few extra ones to add on and get you going in the right direction. On behalf of Weaver Leathercraft, I'd like to thank you for watching this video. Be sure and follow along as we put these tools to use and dive a little bit deeper into floral carving.